And when I said that on camera, one of the cameramen, as soon as the camera stopped rolling, he came running over to me and he said, I live in LA and all my friends and I have daughters, we have girls, and there are hardly any boys in the classrooms. Is that why? And I said, yeah. And a few weeks later, Jesse Ventura met Alex Jones for a meeting. Alex Jones is an official advisor. And Jesse is absolutely huge. I look like a flea next to him.
Yeah.
And he came bounding across the parking lot and grabbed Alex Jones by the shoulders and started shaking him and saying, now they're putting depleted uranium in the water. So I guess Jesse got my message. So the other thing that's happening, yes?
How is the uranium getting there?
By the wind, the air currents. And what the problem is that nuclear power plants, depleted uranium, and now Fukushima, it's floating up from the ground into the troposphere at very low altitudes, and that's the most turbulent and dynamic part of the atmosphere. It's where all the hurricanes and storms and rain and snow occur. And nuclear particles are collectors or nucleating agents for moisture in air movements. So the water collects on the ionizing radiation particle until it's heavy enough to fall out like a raindrop. And because snowflakes have sharp edges and sharp tips and everything, they are highly charged along those edges and on the tips. And so 95% of the radioactive particles in the air when it's snowing are collected on the snowflakes. So in mountain areas where our water supplies come from is where the highest rain out and snow out of radiation occurs. So it can be radioactive up by Sacramento, up in the mountains. There was an operating nuclear reactor in Sacramento, and 95% of the emissions ended up in the Sierras, which supplies all the drinking water for the Bay Area, and it also goes down to Los Angeles, and it's used for irrigating our food and for dairies. And so you see, radiation can end up anywhere, but inevitably it ends up in our bodies. So in the Columbia River also there are freshwater otters. And freshwater otters have a baculum or a penis bone to help them reproduce. And in the Columbia River, the freshwater otters, the baculum is getting smaller and smaller, and the estrogen and hormone effects are causing male otters to forget how to breed. This is happening in alligators in Florida in the swamps also. And it's also causing hermaphrodites in the animal populations and in human populations. So we have increasing numbers of babies born who have sexual organs of both male and female. And in the Arctic, where the Russians did bomb tests, there are female polar bears with cubs, and the female polar bears have female genitals, but they also have male genitals. In a woman runner, a black woman from Africa, South Africa, she was running and winning all her races. She was 18 years old, and she was going to the Olympics. And people said, wait a minute, maybe she's a man. She can't win all those races and be a woman. Let's test her. So they tested her urine for testosterone. She had elevated testosterone, but it was not out of the range for females. So they said, well, then let's examine her internally. And so when they examined her internally, she had no uterus and no ovaries. She had testes, but she had a vagina, and externally she looked like a female. Now what happens is, in the developing embryo, there are two cells, and if that embryo is a female, those develop into ovaries. If that is a male, those two cells develop into testes. So all you need is a couple of wild electrons from one radioactive particle, and you start changing and switching and confusing and disturbing the information flow. Yes. So now I'm going to talk about diseases related to radiation exposure. And what happened is, I'm a geoscientist, and I understand earth processes and circulation and cycles and so forth. And nowhere in the United States officially do they ever link disease to the environment, because that would endanger the nuclear weapons program. And I went to Japan, and I got the vital statistics of Japan. Now, in every country, the vital statistics are collected, but they're just piles of numbers, which who would ever understand unless you're an epidemiologist or you get lucky and somebody shows you how to do it. They never graph them. So I got the death from diabetes in Japan. This is for all ages and all sexes. And you can see that diabetes was very rare before 1950. Now, before insulin was introduced, children who got diabetes simply died by the time they were 7 or 8 years old. And so diabetes has always been very, very, very rare. However, when nuclear bomb tests started, and this is the nuclear bomb test period, 1963 is when it ended, and you can see the lasting effects until the mid-1970s. And that's when nuclear power plants were introduced, and the nuclear power plant emissions replaced the nuclear bomb test emissions. So this is a period of the nuclear power plants. And then in 1990, the United States introduced depleted uranium weapons to the battlefield for the first time. Henry Kissinger gave them to the Israelis to use in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And that completely contaminated the Golan Heights. Now, there were a lot of American citizens who were living on kibbutzes in Israel, in the Golan Heights. And some of them live in Berkeley now. We have a Berkeley population that is 35% Jewish. And when they heard me talking on KPFA and other stations about this, they called me up and they said, some of them said, all the women in my family have breast cancer. Is it because of the depleted uranium in the Golan Heights in 1973? And I said, yes, it is. This is the no-fly zone. That is the increase in diabetes in Japan, and this profile, by the way, is global. It represents the global effects of depleted uranium. And this is 1990 to the year 2000. That was Clinton, and it was mostly Clinton, but it was George Herbert Walker Bush also. And George Herbert Walker Bush, who started the Carlyle Group, had a very great vested interest in depleted uranium because the Carlyle Group made their first really big money off of depleted uranium weapons.
What's the scale on the left side there? Deaths per 100,000?
Okay, just a minute. Let me make this smaller. Yeah. Deaths per 100,000. And I broke this down by age group too. And what you see is that after the 50-year-olds, for 40 and 50 and younger, the diabetes rates are very low because people have very healthy immune systems. But for the older people, as you go 10 years older, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the effects of diabetes death increase more and more with each 10 years. And that's because people have damaged immune systems, they have other disease problems, and they're weaker. So depleted uranium is actually a depopulation agent, especially for the unborn and the young and the elderly. So with the depleted uranium weapons, the effect of global pollution is depopulation of the youngest and the oldest in populations. It's a great killer, believe me. Yeah. So then I said, wait a minute, I want to know more about diabetes. And it just so happened that the New York Times published a 10 full-page article on diabetes. The nuclear weapons program in the United States cost about $2 to $3 billion in today's money. That's the Manhattan Project and the nuclear weapons program. The cost of diabetes to the U.S. government in 2010 was $350 billion, and it's going up every year. And guess who the decision makers are who decide what weapons they'll use? Well, it's the politicians. And guess who owns the pharmaceutical companies? It's Cheney and Bush and Rumsfeld and people like that. So they're making the decision to use genocidal weapons and profiting, and then they're making us sick if we live, and they make more profits on the pharmaceuticals which they're selling to us. Disaster capitalism.
Are you going to talk about how the depleted uranium contaminated the Middle East?
The Middle East?
Yes. Like Iraq and
I can talk a little bit about it, but
in our two wars. You know.
yes, I will. I'll mention it, but I can give a whole talk if you want a really big enchilada. So what we have here is this is the global contamination of bomb testing material, and you can see that in the northern hemisphere it's in the same latitude as the nuclear bomb tests, and the highest rates of diabetes in the southern hemisphere are in the latitude where the British and the French did bomb testing. And you can even see the dilution effect that rain out over the Atlantic has by the time it reaches the tip of Africa. It's much less. And look at Africa. That has the lowest diabetes rates in the world. How come black Americans, African Americans, have the highest diabetes in the United States? And this proves it. This is